Welcome to the Determined Truth Podcast.
Want the truth? You can't handle the truth.
Where we aim to explore questions of truth, the scriptures, and what it means for the church today. Here are your hosts, Rob Dalrymple and Vinny Angelo.
Hey everyone, welcome in. We're doing another standalone episode where we thought important to showcase one of the things that you do on the live streams. And so you regularly have live stream. It seems like they're almost like at least twice a month. It seems like you have a live stream, if not more.
We're having them weekly at times, and sometimes we'll take a couple weeks off. It just depends.
Yeah. And so if you don't already connect with Rob on Facebook, you could go ahead and friend him there. And we have a Determined Truth Facebook page, and that is always going to plug that information as well. Definitely follow that page. But on this episode, this was an interview you had with Russell Jeung, who we've had him on the podcast before, haven't we? I think years ago.
No, I've only done a live stream with Russell. This is the second one that we've done with him.
Okay, so maybe I was on that because I remember I think we had him on the podcast.
Okay,
maybe. Who knows?
I don't remember that.
Honestly, we're hitting 4 years right now.
I know.
And so we've done a lot of podcasts. So it's hard to keep track of all this stuff.
We've done like 1.5 million episodes.
Which is crazy because we have 18 billion downloads.
Isn't it amazing?
Yes. But anyway,
enough about only 8 billion people, so somebody's listening to us twice.
Yes. Enough about us,
or
though.
3 times.
What do you all think about us? No, but in today's...
delete all that.
No, that was good. In today's replaying of that live...
We're going to do a poll.
Okay.
Would you please reply and let us know whether you like Vinny better or Rob better? How's that?
Yes. And the best way to the way to make this happen, we're going to do this based on donations. So
I think that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So you could go to determinedtruth.com, go to the give tab, and $1 for Rob is a vote and $1 for Vinny is a vote. Let's see how many $1 deposits we could get.
If it's $1, that's almost like you hate us.
Oh, so
I think it should be like $100.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you hate Vinny and Rob, donate $1. But if you whoever you love more, then you give a bigger donation. And that's how we show our love for one another.
We don't want like Washington's. I don't know who's on the other paper bills.
We want Benjamin's.
Is it Benjamin?
Yeah, that's the $100.
Yeah, that's $100. So
this is for a tax-dedeductible gift. As
that's
Determined Truth is a 501c3. Okay,
anyway, but I digress.
As we digress. So we had Russell on, and you guys have what kinds of things did you guys discuss?
Yeah, Russell had a phenomenal conversation on immigration. He does a lot of work. He's a Chinese American, 6th-generation American. He's a professor at San Francisco State, a sociologist. He was one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential men in the year 2021 because he started an organization about Asian hate crimes after Trump began calling it the the China virus. And so he just phenomenal work. And he's just talking about as soon as the immigration crackdown happened, and whatever your views on immigration are, his answer was, I know what this is going to mean for the Chinese American community because I know what history America has done to Chinese Americans. And so we talked about a lot of that, talked about the issue of immigration as a whole and the reality of we need to have pathways for people to legally immigrate into our country. And it was a really good conversation.
Russell,
and it was shorter than this intro.
This is very true. Russell appeared on the Determined Truth podcast on March the 5th, 2023.
Okay, wait a minute. That means you weren't listening to anything I just said.
Oh, you were talking?
Because you were looking it up. Yeah.
Oh, hey, can you really?
I think by the way, when I edit the podcast, I go, I never realized Vinny said that. Because, although I actually go, I don't realize I said that either.
It's funny. My wife says the same thing most of the time. Yeah.
My wife said you were talking?
Yeah, exactly. All right, everyone. We hope you enjoy this live stream. Make sure to follow us on social media, especially on Facebook, the Determined Truth Facebook page, where you'll be able to always be notified of the live streams and other events we have going on.
Yeah. And if you want to listen to the live streams or watch them live, subscribe to the Determined Truth YouTube channel.
Yes. Very good. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoy the show.
I want to welcome you all again to another one of our Determined Truth live streams. Today, we want to address one of the most pressing issues in the United States: immigration, justice, and what does it mean to be the people of God who follow the way of Jesus and uphold human dignity? Now, this may not be the most pressing issue for you, but I think it should be one of them because we cannot love our neighbors when we sit silently while they suffer injustice. President Trump campaigned on the promise to target criminal immigrants and criminal immigration, but his executive orders have largely dismantled the humanitarian avenues for lawful immigration. He's been prohibiting asylum claims, pausing all refugee resettlement, freezing funds to lawful and organizations caring for legal refugees and immigrants, and revoking parole and temporary protected status. A report just yesterday noted that some of those who were sent to the notorious maximum security prison in El Salvador were not only here legally, but had immigration hearings already scheduled. The current administration has empowered federal agents to detain and deport some individuals, not because they committed a crime, but because they dared to exercise their First Amendment rights to free speech. They're being targeted simply for speaking out against the war in Gaza or for criticizing U.S. foreign policy. We need to think about this. People are being punished for using their voice to advocate for justice. Free speech is not a crime. It's what this country was founded on. For all this talk about make America great again, and we can debate what that even means, I would assert that our right to free speech is near the top of this list of what makes America great. It's what sets us apart from Russia, North Korea, and many other countries. Deporting people or threatening to deport people merely for exercising their constitutional right to free speech is not just a legal issue. It's a moral crisis. When the government uses immigration enforcement to silence dissent, we're not only betraying our constitutional values, we're embracing authoritarian tactics. But this is only one element of the problem. The current administration's policies are disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities, immigrants from Muslim majority countries, and people whose skin color or accent makes them a suspect in the eyes of those in power. Racism is embedded in the very structure of these decisions. And even more, the denial of due process, locking up people or deporting them without a fair hearing, undermines the basic principles of justice that our country was founded on. The Secretary of Homeland Security doesn't even know what habeas corpus means. She thought it gave the president the right to deport people. And then there's a scandalous element of corporate profit, privatized detention centers. Some of them are operated by corporations with deep political connections. They're making millions from this crackdown. They're benefiting directly from suffering and dehumanization of immigrants. The longer people are held in these detention centers, the more money these companies make. There's little to no concern for due process, only for payments that are due. As followers of Jesus, we believe that every person bears the image of God, and we cannot be silent when our government uses fear, racism, profit, and political convenience to crush the vulnerable. Joining me today is Russell Jeung, professor, I hope I said that, Russell, professor of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University. Dr. Jeung was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential persons in 2021. He received his BA in human biology and MA in education from Stanford University. He obtained a PhD in sociology from UC Berkeley in 2000. He's author of a number of different books. First off, From Family Sacrifices, The Worldview and Ethics of Chinese Americans, published in 2019. Then he wrote Moving Movers, Student Activism and the Emergence of Asian American Studies, and At Home in Exile, Finding Jesus Among My Ancestors and Refugee Neighbors. He's written a number of other books, but his research interest includes the sociology of race, the sociology of religion, the social and social movements. Dr. Jeung is extensively engaged with his students in conducting community-based participatory research with Asian American communities. In March of 2020, Dr. Jeung co-founded Stop AAPI Hate, a project of the Chinese for Affirmative Action, the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council, and San Francisco State Asian American Studies. This coalition was awarded the 2021 Webby Award, I think it's Webby Award, for Social Movement of the Year. Russell, thank you so much for joining us. And let's just begin by you telling us more about yourself and your family, your academic work, and your heart behind activism as a whole.
I'm sure. Thanks for inviting me, Rob.
You're welcome.
So as you said, I'm a professor of Asian American Studies, and I'm in this field teaching about ethnic studies, even using critical race theory, because my family's been in the U.S. for 6 generations now. My great-great-grandparents came, but all the history that Asian Americans have gone through in the U.S., my family's experienced. Through the generations, we experienced mass exclusion, where Chinese were excluded in 1882. We faced mass deportation. My great-granduncle was deported. We faced mass dispossession. 168 Chinese communities were removed by mob violence in the 19th century, and my family was one of them. And so we ended up in San Francisco because it was the only place of refuge against racism. We faced mass detention at Angel Island Immigration Center.
Wow.
A lot of my aunts and uncles, my mom faced mass family separation because of health policies regarding tuberculosis. And you would think by 5 generations, my family would be more acculturated and assimilated, but I still grew up in a really large Chinese and Asian American community, and that's because of all these racial policies that shaped us. Knowing my family's history, but also receiving a lot of privilege and opportunity, I just feel like it's my responsibility to give back to the community, to take what privilege that I have as an Asian American and as a follower of Jesus, to give back to the community. A lot of my work, My scholarship, my activism are all based on my faith. And I grew up in a Chinese church. And so I think I have a strong sense of calling to pursue justice. God's given me so much.
Wonderful. Now, a few years ago, you founded Stop AAPI Hate. Tell us what that is and a little bit more about this.
Yeah, Stop AAPI Hate is a coalition. And what we did during the pandemic is we created an online reporting center for people to report instances of discrimination and harassment. When COVID was coming, I knew that Chinese and Asians would get attacked because that's our history. Whenever an epidemic comes from Asia, Asians would be scapegoated and blamed for it and then face interpersonal violence and racist policies. And that's exactly what happened in COVID-19. And we began to track the racism. This a website, I don't know who would ever hear about us, but we started getting hundreds a day. And that was the same week President Trump began to insist on using the term Chinese virus.
Yeah,
And
China
that did
virus.
Yeah, and so that did two things. It racialized a biological virus, and then it stigmatized Chinese people. And it became part of people's schema of how they saw the disease and how they reacted to Asian people. People were triggered by Asians and went into fight or flight response, I would say. They weren't intentionally being racist. They were unconsciously just reacting out of this fight or a flight response to COVID. So Stop API Hate, we get hundreds of incidents. They were appalling. People were spitting at elders. They were stalking friends that I know. And so our reports really helped highlight that the problem wasn't just a few isolated, prejudiced individuals, but no, there's something wrong with our society, our nation that institutionalizes racism, and from the highest levels that harassment, mocking Asians was made the norm. And the data plus graphic videos of people getting attacked, and then eventually the Atlanta spa shootings where 8 people were actually killed and 6 were Asians, that really galvanized the Stop Asian Hate movement.
Wow, unbelievable. Now, how has your Christianity and your Christian faith shaped your understanding of justice and the call to the work that you do?
Yeah, people ask me that a lot. I guess I grew up and say I just read the Bible, and our church taught us follow scriptures. That's authoritative, and so okay, look at all these scriptures about blessed are the poor, and we sang this song, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness," all the time at camp and growing up. And I go, okay, if that's the thing we're supposed to do first, I'm going to do that. And I knew that it wasn't just about having a right relationship with God, it's having a right relationship with others, but it's also having a right relationship in our communities and our societies. And when I looked around, I saw, because I worked in Chinatown and I lived in San Francisco in an urban environment, I saw a lot of poor people. I thought, that's not right. And I recognized that communities of color, they didn't have opportunities and worked just as hard as white people, but they didn't get ahead, and that's not right. And it was easy having a strong sense of right and wrong, furthered by my faith, to see there's a lot to work for in terms of making things right. And that extends not only to in society to have right relations, even with creation and how we've been extractive of our environment. I think that's wrong too. And so for me, seeking justice is just integral to the faith. It's what it means to follow Jesus as he did.
Wow, that's wonderful. So we're seeing an increase in deportations, including individuals with legal status, as I mentioned in the introduction. What's your assessment of what's happening right now?
As we were talking earlier, I think it's a matter of life or death. It's not just, it's been used as a political issue, clearly to help one party and to benefit, as you said in the introduction, corporations that create prisons. But it's life and death for these families who are getting separated. So as of this year, maybe around 200,000 people have been deported. Trump wanted to deport 1 million people, and the government really doesn't have the capacity to do. But a quarter to a half of these people don't have criminal records.
Right.
And so they're just asylum seekers who have the right to be here, who are the legal right to be here. They're not illegals, and they are not criminals, yet they're being deported. And a lot of these people have children. So these are called mixed status people. are mixed status families, and there's 6 million children who are US citizens, but their parents are unauthorized. So you can imagine 6 million kids in schools today are worried about their parents being deported while they're at school. So I don't know how they could concentrate. But the problem with deportation is that I say it's life and death because there are stories of one example is a Chinese family. They cross the border. The kid is an American citizen. She has brain cancer. And they live in Mexico, but they come to America for her treatment. But the family got deported when she was coming over. And so now she can't even get her brain cancer treatment.
Wow.
And this is how we're treating young people who are American citizens. So in that case, it's life or death. I know of Asians who've died at detention centers, and there's no investigations as to why people are passing away in these detention centers. So it's life and death in that way. But for the 6 million kids, it leads to family separation. And for me, that's so painful and so traumatizing. It's a lifetime trauma to be a kid and then have your parents taken away in the middle of the night or during the day, and you have no idea where they are. You don't know what happened to them. And you're going to have to live with that all your life. And the separation is permanent. They can't come back after being deported. So these are just, for me, heinous. It's cruel and unusual punishment to me to separate families in this way. And just one last comment about this.
Sure.
My students, we actually interviewed someone who was deported, and he said in the US, he had a life sentence, and then he got paroled, and then he got deported. But he says now he has an eternal life sentence. He used Christian terms because he was separated from his family. He'll never be able to hug them or see them again in person. And it is unfathomable what we're doing to people, and not treating people as humans, but treating them as objects, political pawns, really.
Yeah, to fit a political agenda. That's racialized. It's a racialized agenda as well. Yeah. And I've heard of. Go ahead.
A clear example is refugee resettlement, as you said, was cut. And we know of an Afghan family. Yeah. They were here, and there's a 12-year-old daughter was about to get on the plane to be reunited with her family. She's only 12 years old, and you can imagine your own 12-year-old middle schooler. And about to get on the plane, but then they cut refugee resettlement. So she had to get off the plane, and she's still separated from her family because they cut refugee resettlement. However, the Trump administration has allowed white South Africaners to come in as refugees because he says they're persecuted. They're not under war situations. They're not facing genocide like other people yet. Whites are being allowed to come in as refugees, whereas our former allies in Afghanistan.
Where's this girl from? Where she live? Or where is she located?
She's from Afghanistan.
And that's where she still is? So her family's here?
Her family,
Wow.
Yeah, part of her family was able to come in. She's probably in the refugee camp.
And now we're sending people from Afghanistan back because the whole idea of them coming over here was what we did in the war wasn't helping,
exactly.
And they worked for us. Hey, we'll give you asylum over here because we know that once we leave Afghanistan, you're not going to be safe any longer. Oh, guess what? You got to go back. They're just going to get slaughtered. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's the idea of being a refugee is that your life is in jeopardy and you're going to face persecution. So you have to gain refuge. You need refuge. But what happens is that refugees come over here legally, but if they get deported for some random reason, people are getting deported back. And that's what I call double jeopardy. They leave their lives out because their life is in jeopardy, but then they're sent back where their lives are in jeopardy again. So that's one case of double jeopardy. And we could talk about this idea of double jeopardy later on too, but that's happening. And these are Christians. A lot of people flee because they're Christians facing persecution for their faith. Their lives are in jeopardy, and then they get deported back. We're sending back Christians to face persecution. And that's what the U.S. is doing.
Hey everyone, we want to thank you for joining us on today's podcast. And we want to remind you that everything we provide at Determined Truth is free of charge. And this even includes all of the teaching that Rob, Danny, and myself do on a weekly basis in our online Bible studies, live streams, and our coaching for pastors in India and around the world. We don't have any supporters who get special behind-the-scenes access, but we can only do this with the generous support from those of you who can afford to give. So if you'd prayerfully consider supporting us with a fully tax-deductible donation, with anything from $5 a month or more, we will continue to challenge the church to be the church. To give, go to determinetruth.com and click on the Give tab, or find the link in today's show notes. Thanks.
And we talked about this on our live stream that we did with Mako Nagasawa a couple months back. It's on the Determined Truth YouTube channel. Look under the playlist of immigration. And we were discussing the fact that a lot of this immigration stuff is they're coming to our country because of things that America did to make their country unsafe for them to stay there. And they're trying to find, it's our fault that they're fleeing. And I wrote a blog on this as well. Afghanistan's a perfect example of this. They're suffering persecution because of what the U.S. did in Afghanistan.
Yeah. It's because of American imperialism and our war industry. It's also when we deport gang members that create gang violence in places like Honduras. I work with a lot of gang kids, and they say the police were realizing that as in Honduras, that the gangs were using military maneuvers. And that's because the gang members were trained in the U.S. military, and then they were gang members as well, and then they got deported, and so they began using American military tactics with their gangs in Honduras. It's all American-bred violence that's stoking this type of human migration patterns and then remigration patterns. It's an ecosystem.
Quick commercial here. I'm working on getting a live stream together in the next month or so with talking about the U.S. imperialism in Central America and South America as well. So stay tuned for that. If you're watching us on the live stream here, we encourage you to go ahead and throw something in the comment box and let us know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions, we'll see if we have time to get to them for Russell. So thank you so much for your time. Talk about how this is affecting Asian Americans and the broader immigrant communities emotionally, practically, and spiritually. I think we've already touched on that a little bit, but you want to expand on that a little bit more, or any particular stories that you want to add to that?
Yeah. So 1 out of 7 Asians in the U.S. don't have authorization. They're unauthorized, undocumented persons. And that's a pretty high percent. We know that these families with the mass deportation orders have a lot of anxiety and fear, just like other unauthorized communities. So my wife used to work at an Asian health clinic, and there's reports of a lot of people not seeking medical care because they're afraid of getting deported, not seeking social services. In our local schools, a lot of kids aren't going to school when Trump.
These are legal citizens. Are these American citizens? Or
the kids are American citizens. The parents are unauthorized. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then with the repeal of birthright citizen, I just did a forum, and one of the legal reps said she knows that pregnant women are getting prenatal care because they're afraid. And they're afraid that they'll have an American kid born here, and then they'll just take away the kid born here, because if birthright citizenship is taken away, the kid won't be here legally. And the fear just endangers, again, the health and welfare of these families on a real practical level. And then again, on the emotional level, there's constant anxiety. And again, my students, we've interviewed some unauthorized people, and they just say that being cast and scapegoated and labeled illegal when they just came here, a lot again came as kids, and it wasn't their fault that they're here. But to be called illegal really does give you a sense of shame and having to live in the shadows, and then mistrust of government that I think stays with you. Even for the Chinese community, a lot of us, my grandparents came illegally, and we had this paper son and paper daughter system to get here where they bought false papers. And a lot of people say, Asians don't deal with the police or don't deal with the government. And that's because we weren't allowed to come. And so we had to come illegally. And that's why we stay avoidant of government. Because first of all, we couldn't become citizens. And then if we came illegally, then we could be deported. We just didn't want to deal with the American system.
Okay, but somebody's going to say to that, but they're here illegally, they should go home, or we should send them back.
Yeah. But again, as we said in the beginning, people come here for a reason. People don't normally want to leave your homeland. You don't want to leave your relatives. You don't want to leave
exactly
the place where you become mute and deaf in a society where you don't speak the language. And so people are fleeing for safety. People are leaving for their families. You wouldn't risk jumping into crossing rivers or facing rape and crime, criminal activity. You don't do that unless home is more dangerous than where you're going to. And people have to realize how violent and horrific these situations are. You don't want your kid to face gang violence and join a gang and then suffer or perpetrate gang violence. So you have to leave. And so you're seeking asylum. People are coming for refuge. And Jesus did that. Joseph and Mary, they had to flee government orders. And so they left for Egypt. They left in the night. They had to leave right away.
Yeah.
If Jesus came to the U.S., we wouldn't let him in.
Exactly.
Because, hello, brown Palestinians, where are your papers? You should come here legally and wait in line. But back home, there's an order to kill you, right? And so what's Mary and Joseph going to do? That's the issue. Yeah.
We can even go back. I mean, we won't go down this path right now, but and so we say the American founders of this country came here illegally in the sense that they weren't residents of this place, and then they slaughtered the natives and took the land. The whole system that's there is to simply say, hey, this is a refuge for persecuted Christians to come to the colonies. It's a colony by its very nature. You're taking land that ultimately belongs to somebody else and slaughter the natives. This is just, now, there are reports of ICE detaining long-term residents with green cards and legal status. What's happening legally and politically that allows this to happen, and talk about the consequences and effects of that?
The courts aren't allowing it to happen. That's why there's all these lawsuits against, again, holding and detaining people. That's the habeas corpus issue of not giving them due process and having a hearing or appealing. American citizens are getting caught up in detention. Legal residents are being detained. And again, like you said in the beginning, a lot of them are targeted for their participation in Gaza protests. A lot of Columbia University students are getting detained or targeted for detention and have to seek safety. They're legally here. They were just exercising their free speech, and they're getting targeted for deportation. So in a lot of these cases, lack of due process, detaining American citizens. So there's all these lawsuits. Oh, using the alien enemy, the legality used is that, oh, they're terrorists, they're alien enemies. That's all under legal challenge now. So the processes by which the Trump administration is trying to deport people or actually deporting people are all under legal challenge. So it's not legal to do what they're doing. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, the courts have stalled the deportations, but the Trump administration is doing it anyway, right? So they're defying the judicial system. So there's no checks and balances right now. And the problem is that the executive authority is supposed to enforce the law and uphold the law, but it's not doing so. It's saying it's above the judicial system, it's above the law. And that's the problem. It's a constitutional crisis right now where the executive branch is overusing its powers, not being checked by the judicial system. And that's really dangerous as well. And there's more cases of this too. Like he may overturn birthright citizenship. He may repeal DACA. So people who are dreamers, there's 6 million of them, they may become undocumented if they're no longer under DACA status. There's a lot of people under what we call temporary protected status, TPS. So they came from Venezuela or from Bhutan or Burma because of the war in those countries. Their status might get suspended and they become undocumented. These legal ways that people are coming here under asylum or under protected status are all getting repealed or ignored or retracted. And they're just using any means to say they're getting rid of criminals. But again, over half the people aren't criminals. And so there's what we call false positives, right? They're saying they're positively a criminal, they're illegal, so they shouldn't be here. But a lot of them, no, they have the right to be here. No, they are innocent. They haven't committed a crime. No, they are they're American citizens, some of them. And so these false positives, it's a loss of human rights.
Unbelievable. Now you have some particular stories that you might want to share in terms of that. Obviously the Mahmoud Khalil story that you mentioned already in passing about the Palestinian green card holder. And by the way, the Constitution of the United States guarantees the right to free speech to anyone who's a legal resident of the United States. That includes green card holders. So Mahmoud Khalil did nothing wrong. He exercised free speech, and the Constitution guarantees him that right to free speech by starting the protests at Columbia University for what's happening in Israel and Gaza as well. But other stories like this of people here, and what you're saying then is they're here legally, but then the United States makes these declarations that take the legal recourse away from them, and all of a sudden they're illegal as if they are criminals, but they're actually not criminals.
And so there, again, a lot of Latinos, a lot of Asians have been caught up. Some students, an Indian Fulbright student, she actually self-deported because, again, I think the harassment and the threat of detention was too scary. So Chung is, again, another legal permanent resident from Korea. She protested, and now she's in hiding because ICE came after her. Again, another legal resident. And then the biggest case, again, is Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, who's a Salvadorian, and he got deported illegally.
Yeah.
He was imprisoned without trial in a maximum security prison. And can he come back? And he's been traumatized.
He's separated from his wife and young child, I believe, as well. Yeah.
So we're working with one person from Laos. His name is Sammy V. And he did commit a crime, but he paid his crime, right? And so because he paid his crime, because he really worked on his rehabilitation, he was given parole. And the judges deemed him fit to re-enter society. Upon parole, he married and he took care of his two stepdaughters, raised them. He's worked for like decades since, raising his kids, being a great family member. His kids say he's super generous. He helps homeless people off the street, brings them home. And now, but he has to go for ICE check-ins once a year. And his check-in's coming up in June. He's afraid, again, even though he's paid his penalty, that he'll face double jeopardy, which is, again, second punishment for being deported. And then third punishment of possibly having his life in danger because he's in a country where he has no resources, no family, doesn't have the language. But now what he says is that he's fearful because he's seeing Asians being sent to Central America, to Guantanamo Bay. They tried to send them to Libya. They're trying to send them to Sudan.
South Sudan, yes.
Yeah. So they're not even sending people back to their countries of origin, but they're just shipping people wherever they want. I think that's human trafficking. It's
that's
forced.
A good point.
It's forced removal, physical removal of people against their will, against their right.
And Russell, you couldn't send someone to another country without making a deal with that other country. That other country has to agree to this. Some political stuff is going on. We'll do this for you. You do this for us. That's the definition of human trafficking. That's a good point.
So that's his fear. I didn't even think about that. He's not already fearful of leaving his family, right? That's his first concern. But then to be sent to, he knows he hears of the prison conditions in Guantanamo Bay. He knows the prison conditions of Salvador because he was in prison in the U.S. and he knows this. I don't know I can't imagine what it's like to walk around thinking I could just be shipped anywhere in the world and have no control, no power, no legal recourse, and it's permanent again. And it's like, it's Kafkaesque. It's just a living nightmare. And another person said to us, it's like having a terminal disease and you never know when your time's up. And so you just have the sense of foreboding doom. And that's how they feel having to face this threat of deportation.
And we will continue to address this issue here at Determine Truth, and we've done so on blogs and elsewhere as well, because there's a biblical responsibility for the followers of Christ to care for the foreigner, the stranger, the alien in your midst. Leviticus 19, I think it's verse 34, talks about caring for the alien, the stranger that is among you. This is our call. It's our responsibility to be the good Samaritan. And who is my neighbor? Not the question like, who's my neighbor? Which ones do I care for? But to whom am I a neighbor to? Which one acted like a neighbor? And we want to thank Mike. Thank you for your little note from New Zealand. And it might be a small country, but I hope you're doing better than we are here in the United States because we're at the front of this problem. Russell, I know we don't have a lot of time left here, but how does what we're seeing today connect with the historical treatment of Asian Americans? I think this is part of the story that a lot of Americans don't know, what America has done to the Chinese and to other Asian communities there. Can you fill us in a little bit about how there's a historical context to this as well?
Yeah, the historical context is initially in the 19th century, Americans saw themselves as a white nation, but after the Civil War, they allowed African Americans to become citizens. But with the influx of Chinese, white workers felt threatened by the competition. And so they wanted to keep the U.S. as a white nation. So they passed the Chinese Exclusion Act and said Chinese were unassimilable. They're pagan heathen. They're not Christian. Religious means were actually used to keep out Chinese. And part of that, later on, 10 years later, they extended that and they required Chinese to register, like they're trying to make illegal aliens register today. And the Chinese were just dumbstruck by that. Like, they called it the dog tag law because they were saying, we're the only people you're making carry these alien registration cards like we're dogs. And if we're not carrying it, then we're going to be rounded up like a dog and sent to the dog pound. So they actually called it the dog tag law. And there were 100,000 Chinese in the US at that time. They were all made illegal. And so they actually engaged in the largest case of civil disobedience of the time because they thought, this is so unjust. This is such unequal treatment. This violates the 14th Amendment. And so they go, this is clearly unjust. And they filed a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. The Chinese government, they did a diplomatic appeal. Chinese engaged in civil disobedience for a year. But the Supreme Court ruled, no, America has the right to defend its borders. And so these people either have to register or they have to go. And so because of that, and part of the law was that Chinese were named aliens ineligible for citizenship. We were made permanent aliens because we couldn't become citizens. And once it's a racially coded legal term. And then later, other Asians were also called aliens ineligible for citizenship. So if they didn't want Chinese to work at a place, they say no aliens could work here. And that just meant no Chinese could work here. There were all these alien land laws that said anybody who's an alien can't buy land, but that only meant Chinese because we were the only people, and then later Japanese.
Officially classified. Yeah.
And then that's why they incarcerated Japanese during World War II, because they were alien enemies. And this alienation status is what allows America to deport people because they're not citizens. And so we were the first undocumented people. We were the first deported people. And this alien status, again, has led to mass detention and mass deportation, not only of Latinos, but to start, Asians were used. And then again, Asians were the first to fight this type of designation. And that's why I really am dedicated to really fighting mass deportation, because I think it's unwelcoming. It is creating a different class of people. And the problem is that, and we're talking about your scriptures about how we should treat foreigners and aliens. I think that the scriptural story of the Jewish people and the Hebrew people was that God commanded them, take care of the foreigners and remember what it feels like to be a foreigner.
Because you were,
their primary identity wasn't to be liberated colonizers. Their primary identity is to remember you're the people of Abraham who had to migrate. You're the people who had to be liberated from Egypt. Remember how that feels, because then you develop the compassion, the empathy for others. And so they were always reminded that they were foreigners in a land, and that's their primary identity. And they were actually required by law, by Leviticus law, to leave land on the edges for the foreigner and the poor. They're supposed to allow the foreigner and the poor to glean from the fields. It wasn't institutionalized racism like today. It was institutionalized justice for the foreigner that Leviticus wrote into law. And they actually had a tithe. They had a tithe every 3 years that went to the foreigner. So instead of complaining about the burden of foreigners, we should think it's our duty, the way the Bible says, to take care of the poor. Jesus said, I was a stranger and you invited me in. And so for me, it's not about seeing people as cost or criminals or even neighbors. This is how we're treating Jesus.
Amen.
And if we're supposed to be followers of Jesus, we have the gift to be able to see Jesus in others and invite him in. We have the gift to see Jesus and to feed him. We have the gift. See, oh, Jesus is in prison at a detention center. We should go meet him. And Matthew 25 is our call. And if the church acted like Matthew 25, the early church did, and the church really grew because they were treating people the way Jesus treated others and how Jesus wanted to be treated. I think that's our call. Let's treat people as Jesus wanted to be treated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. God is love. And when we love our neighbor and our enemies, we act like God does. It's that simple. They'll know you're my disciples if you love one another. How has your organization responded to the immigration crisis? What work are you doing at the intersection of racial justice and immigration?
Yeah, well, Stop AAPI, I'm not with them anymore, but they're fighting a lot of these deportation policies. A lot of people are filing lawsuits. On the local level, a lot of groups do the Know Your Rights campaign, where you give these little red cards so that people know that they have the right not open the door to ICE. Even with the new executive order that says ICE could go into churches, there are private places in churches that ICE aren't supposed to enter. And so, first of all, telling people what are the rights of immigrants and how can we who know a lot of immigrants protect their rights. So in I live in Oakland, a lot of schools, teachers, healthcare centers, they all are trained to know the rights of their clients, their students. Oh, wow. And so we protect them in that way. And so we're taught how to respond when ICE comes by, or how can we have a rapid response if we see ICE vans. And that's one individual local response. On the church level, my church has become a sanctuary church.
Okay.
And so the sanctuary movement came most recently in the 1980s to protect Salvadorian migrants. And in the same way, a sanctuary church could just say, we're here to welcome in the stranger, to provide refuge. And in that case, we will do whatever we can to accompany them, to house them, to support them. And so that's what our church declared it to be. And it's actually because our church doesn't have that many people who would be affected. If you really do have a lot of unauthorized people, I wouldn't announce I'm a sanctuary church where ICE knows where you are, right?
Yeah,
but if a lot of churches declare themselves sanctuary churches, ICE won't have the capacity to surveil all of us.
Good point. Yeah.
And so I think those of us who aren't as threatened or as endangered should actually stick up for those without rights, and then just say symbolically, actually, it makes a big difference. If here's a church that's standing up for Jesus in this way, I think that's a powerful movement. So I want to see a new sanctuary movement arise today, where churches stand up and say, no, we think these policies are wrong, are inhumane, are unconstitutional. And so we'll stand in this way. And even if it's a symbolic way, it's still a witness to the broader society that we would want to be a moral voice. We want to be followers of Jesus in this way. So that's my call today, is that let's be sanctuaries to each other. Let's be holy places, holy grounds where people can find refuge. We're all criminals and all illegal in certain ways. And so the church is a refuge for us, and we should make it a refuge for others as well.
Wow. All right. So encouraging to hear from you. At the same time, so grieved to understand the reality and just to be reminded of the reality of what we're actually talking about. And I hope that those watching and listening would just understand the fact that this is beyond partisan politics. This is humanity now. This is what it means to be Christian, and loving our neighbor and loving one another and extending that. And that means to speak up. This is not a time to be silent. If we are silent now, it's only going to get worse. And so, Russell, I want to thank you so much for your friendship. I thank you so much for your work and the things that you're doing, for speaking up. I know you're tired. You've had a long flight and a long day today. And I appreciate your time. And anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
Just blessings to you, Rob, and your podcast and your efforts to speak out the truth and to really pursue what I think the kingdom calls for. So thank you for all your efforts and for inviting me today.
Thanks so much. If you're not following our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe and follow that. Click the button for alerts. We have a wonderful podcast that's going to air June 2nd and June 9th, which relates a little bit to this. So go to the Determined Truth podcast, which you can find on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere you get your podcast. Subscribe to that and follow it. And as well, go to determinedtruth.com and go to the contact page and let us know who you are. And we'll make sure you sign you up for the monthly newsletter to keep you informed of what's going on. So thank you, everyone, for their time. And thanks, Russell, so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
I want to thank you for joining us on today's podcast, and we would love for you to share the work of Determined Truth with others. Please follow this podcast and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your review will go a long way towards helping others find this podcast. Then share it with others so that we can get the word of the gospel of the kingdom to more people.